Why is feminism so confusing? Well, for those of you who know, this is not going to be an enlightening video at all, really. For those of you who are curious, stick with me and we'll get into it. We have to ask the question, what is the goal of feminism? Feminists would say equality, right? Well, right off the bat there, we have to start defining terms. Are we talking about equality of opportunity, or are we talking about equality of outcome? Well, we can immediately rule out equality of opportunity, because women in the West have had that for a long time now. There are no systemic or legal privileges afforded to men now that are not afforded to women. In fact, women have more than men do. And while feminists do push quite a bit for equality of outcome, we can't truly say it's about that either, because feminists only want that in positions of power or what they deem significant jobs, not across the board. We need more women, they say, in male-dominated spheres, but only those like politics. We need more women CEOs, they say, more women in STEM education, but not on the oil rigs or on the waste sanitation crews. Now, I'm not arguing that there should be more women in those careers, but I'm pointing out the inconsistency. So we could say that feminism is about giving women more rights than men, or privilege. But even that argument breaks down eventually. Rights and privilege according to whom? Women have always had the right to defend themselves with firearms, pretty much, for example, but political feminism is staunchly against gun rights. Odd, since they insist that we live in a rape culture, and you'd think that feminism would support a woman's right to defend herself. Especially since a part of the so-called male privilege is the fact, and feminists will cite this, that most men are bigger and stronger than most women. A firearm would level the playing field. Likewise, women used to have the privilege of not being sent to die in war, at least not in combat units. It was feminism that lobbied to change that. And even though some anti-feminists say women should have to sign up for the draft today, it was feminists who originally fought for this as well, vehemently, when they introduced the Equal Rights Amendment, or ERA. Phyllis Schlafly, my lifelong favorite anti-feminist, pretty much single-handedly defeated that bill. We could go on and on. None of this adds up or makes much sense if we're under the illusion that feminism exists to grant equality or rights to women, and that's because it doesn't. Feminism was actually invented as a means of implementing cultural Marxism. It is just one tentacle on the much larger Marxist creature. So what is the goal of feminism within the greater goal of Marxism? To create discontent among women, to cause discord between the sexes, and to dismantle the family unit. Marxism and socialism need to deconstruct all smaller forms of government, like the family, in order to introduce Big Daddy government. To really begin to understand this, we need to go back and talk about community organizers in the realm of so-called social justice. And we need to talk about people like Saul Alinsky. Now, it's been said that Alinsky is to community organizing as Freud is to psychoanalysis. Community organizing begins with the assumption that injustices, small and great, are the results of power imbalances. Those most hurt by the system are those who are most powerless to act on the system. So listening to people's problems empathetically, in many cases fanning the flames, in fact, then telling them the solution, and then bringing people together to enact those solutions, that's what community organizers did and still do. Now, the people need not be any more than useful innocents or useful idiots, which is a term often attributed to Lenin, but originally coined by economist Ludwig von Mises in his 1947 book, Planned Chaos. Von Mises wrote that the term was used by communists for liberals, whom von Mises describes as, quote, confused and misguided sympathizers. I say community organizers would be much more accurately referred to as community agitators. For as Saul Alinsky said, their job was, and I quote, rubbing raw the resentments of the people, fanning their latent hostilities to the point of overt expression. The organizer must search out controversy, for unless there's controversy, people are not concerned enough to act. End quote. This method was and still is applied to race, class, gender, and many other elements of society. The idea was to introduce this notion of the haves and the have-nots and then pit them against one another. Many of the early feminists were community organizers as well, and successfully stirred up discontent among housewives and then women at large. They took very real wrongs committed by individual men and applied them to men at large. They took the very real discontentment and purposelessness that some housewives felt after the Industrial Revolution, when husbands went off to work and children went off to school and they were left at home with many conveniences, and encouraged it among all women. They vilified complementarianism and the traditional family as a construct of the patriarchy. Crisis is necessary for revolution, right? You can't sell happy, content, self-sufficient people on the Marxist state. This is no conspiracy theory. This is history in plain sight for anyone to research, just not as taught in school. Read up on the Frankfurt School. Read up on people like Alice Bailey, Helen Schucman, Julius Wellhausen, Soren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, John Dewey, Betty Friedan, William James, Alfred Kinsey, Aldous Huxley, Benjamin Bloom, B.F. Skinner, Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, John Maynard Keynes, Sigmund Freud, Margaret Sanger, Roger Baldwin, and of course, Saul Alinsky. Marxist philosophy is the underlying reason why, despite having equality and more, feminism is forever grasping for new grievances. Man-spreading, mansplaining, man-interrupting, heap-eating, eye-rape, the pink tax. There will always be something. At no point will feminists admit that it's no longer needed. And when you understand feminism and you view it through the Marxist lens, suddenly its every action does line up. It doesn't otherwise. It begins to make sense according to this matrix alone. So, who out of all of feminism's founders and leaders and the many women who still espouse it today, who are the ones who understand its Marxist beginnings and who are the useful idiots, so-called? Well, it's hard to say. It varies by the individual. What's undeniable is that feminism does have its roots in Marxism, and I would love to see so many more women wake up to this fact and start doing their own research rather than being gullible about feminism's actual purposes. Thanks so much for watching this very brief introduction to feminism's beginnings and how to see it through a Marxist lens. If you enjoyed this at all, feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and thank you as always so much for your support.